Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. Because today, we're opening up a seriously chilling case file. Some forests hide dangerous animals, and others, well, they hide forgotten graves. But according to the source material we're examining today, deep inside Pine Ridge National Forest, there is something that has literally never been alive, yet it has been waiting for centuries. We're going to take a highly objective, structured look at a phenomenon that completely defies logic. It shifts incredibly fast from a standard missing persons investigation into a surreal, psychological nightmare.
That quote is a local legend, but as we'll see, it serves as the ultimate survival rule for the Pine Ridge anomaly. What makes this case study so fascinating, and frankly, so terrifying, is that the threat we're looking at isn't physical violence in the traditional sense. It's about something far more deeply unsettling: total identity theft. Let's trace back to how this anomalous event actually began.
So, here is the objective timeline of the precipitating event. Back in October 2025, three highly experienced hikers, Ryan, Megan, and Lucas, just vanished in Pine Ridge. Now, 5 days later, search teams finally find their campsite. But here is the bizarre part. The fire was still burning, their food completely untouched. Their GPS devices, satellite phones, and neatly arranged backpacks were all just left right there. There were zero footprints leaving the camp, no blood, and absolutely no signs of a struggle. This, of course, prompted the arrival of FBI investigator Ethan Brooks. He's a specialist in unexplained disappearances, and he firmly believed every mystery had a logical explanation.
But Ethan's logical framework was immediately challenged by a single, terrifying number: 10. Investigators found perfectly parallel, deep claw marks on every single tree surrounding the camp. The positioning of these marks strongly suggested that something standing a massive 10 feet tall had slowly, methodically paced around those hikers for the entire night. It wasn't attacking, it was observing them.
The investigation yielded one more absolutely crucial piece of evidence. Out of all the cameras recovered at the site, every single memory card was completely corrupted, except for a damaged GoPro. That camera contained exactly 43 seconds of surviving footage. In this video, the hikers are sitting around the fire, laughing, having a good time, when suddenly every insect in the forest goes completely silent. The camera pans out to the empty trees. Then a voice whispers Ryan's name. But the crazy thing is, the voice sounds exactly like Ryan himself. He looks confused, Lucas laughs it off as a joke, but then the whisper comes again, and it's closer. Then, inexplicably, all three hikers simply stand up and walk together out into the total darkness.
Seeking some local context, investigator Brooks went to talk to a 9-year-old local named Eleanor Graves. Eleanor lives right near the forest and famously refuses electricity, telephones, or even visitors. When Ethan asked her about the disappearances, she literally locked her door and offered this chilling warning about the forest: it learns. She explained that once this ancient entity knows your voice, it never forgets. You see, it doesn't just mimic sound, it steals it, and that's just the first phase of an incredibly insidious process.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact mechanics of the anomaly's identity theft process, as outlined in the source documents. It's a structured 4-step protocol of absolute mimicry and replacement. Step 1, it copies voices to use as a lure. Step 2, it engages in prolonged surveillance. It watches people to study their exact mannerisms. Step 3, it remembers their faces. And Step 4, it replaces them perfectly. It's a terrifying progression, right? It totally shifts our understanding of this entity from just a mindless predator to a calculated, highly methodical intelligence.
So, completely ignoring the local warnings, Ethan Brooks decided to camp alone in Pine Ridge. At exactly 11:37 p.m. on his very first night, the woods went unnaturally silent. I mean, no birds, no wind, no insects, nothing. Then, the psychological horror truly kicked in. Ethan heard his radio crackle, and his partner's voice called his name, saying, "I found them." But here's the catch. His partner was 800 miles away, and that voice? It wasn't coming from the radio at all. It was drifting through the trees. When Ethan stepped outside, he heard a second voice, his mother, who had passed away 10 years earlier, telling him to come here. Whatever was out there was gliding between the trees, always staying just beyond the reach of his flashlight's beam.
The following morning brought physical confirmation that he wasn't just having an isolated hallucination. Ethan discovered ancient symbols etched deeply into the giant pine trees around him. Archaeologists later dated these carvings to be over 2,000 years old. The really spooky part: The translations of these carvings align perfectly with the modern-day warnings. One symbol literally read, "Do not answer." Another read, "It speaks first." And the most disturbing one was this untranslatable symbol depicting a massive mouth filled with hundreds of human eyes. This entity hasn't just appeared. It has been waiting and feeding on identities for centuries. This deep historical context actually explains the tragic case of retired Ranger Daniel Morris. Ranger Morris disappeared into Pine Ridge for 6 days. When rescue teams finally located him, the sheer terror of his experience had literally turned his beard completely white. He never recovered from the psychological shock. In fact, before he died, he whispered only one haunting sentence about what he encountered out there in those woods. "It wore my face." As the investigation deepened, satellite scans revealed something massive, a hidden underground cave right beneath the forest floor. When investigators entered, they found a scene that completely defies natural explanation. The walls were covered in thousands of handprints, from children, adults, the elderly, and all of them were reaching upward as if permanently trapped. Right in the center was a stone altar covered in fresh blood. Yet, there were no animal tracks entering this cave. Actually, scratch that, there was only one set of prints, bare human feet that walked directly into the solid rock wall and never returned. Determined to capture undeniable proof of the anomaly, Ethan installed multiple motion-activated cameras all around his campsite the next night, facing out in all directions. The timestamps on that footage revealed a really critical data point. At exactly 2:13 a.m., every single camera activated simultaneously. Something was completely surrounding the camp.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the impossible, horrifying contrast the footage captured. On one camera, we see the real Ethan, sleeping safely inside his tent. The timestamp absolutely confirms he never left. But outside the tent, on camera 3, another Ethan is standing there. It's just standing there, smiling directly into the lens and watching the real Ethan sleep. It's a perfect visual duplicate, right down to the clothing. That is, until the fake Ethan looks straight into the camera and its eyes roll completely black.
Just before the recording corrupts, the mimic on the camera slowly whispers, "I'm almost ready." This is the moment the chilling realization of the entity's true nature hits. As the local lore stated, it has no body and no face of its own. It survives purely by stealing identities. It doesn't just kill its victims, you guys. It perfects its copies so it can replace them entirely in the real world. Realizing the sheer danger he was in, Ethan bolted, triggering what the source material describes as the final chase. As he ran toward the cave, the forest literally warped around him. Thick fog swallowed the path. Dozens of familiar voices started echoing through the twisted trees. His father, his sister, his best friend. He even heard his own voice telling him not to run. And then, he was totally surrounded by hundreds of silent people. It was every missing hiker, every lost child. They were all smiling, their mouths never moving, speaking in perfect unison, "Come home." In a final, ultimate display of its terrifying capability, the victims' faces began to melt, reforming into hundreds of exact copies of Ethan himself, all just standing there watching him. Ethan supposedly survived this nightmarish encounter by clinging to that ancient rule translated from the trees, "Never answer." He squeezed his eyes shut, tightly covered his ears to block out the impossible chorus of all those familiar voices, and just kept walking blindly through the dark. He completely ignored every lure, every plea, and every sound until the sunlight finally broke through the trees hours later. He really believed he had escaped. So the crucial point is, did he actually escape? 6 months later, Ethan had returned home, but his friends began to notice some deeply unsettling anomalies. The mimic, it seems, isn't perfectly flawless when placed under close, sustained observation. People noted 3 distinct, terrifying signs. Step 1, Ethan never blinked. Step 2, his voice sounded ever so slightly delayed, kind of like an audio track just a fraction of a second out of sync. And step 3, which is by far the most horrifying, his reflection in the mirror would smile just before he did. The copy was practically perfect, sure, but not entirely. The grim conclusion of this case file happened one night when Ethan's neighbor heard him speaking out in the backyard, only to hear a second Ethan answer him from inside the house. The very next morning, both Ethans were completely gone. The police searched the property extensively, top to bottom, but the case remains completely unsolved to this day. The only thing they ever found was a final, chilling message scratched deep into the kitchen wall. It read, "It remembers your voice now." Which brings us to the end of our explainer on the Pine Ridge Forest anomaly. We've traced the evidence of an entity that doesn't just hunt, but meticulously replaces its prey, hiding perfectly in plain sight. It leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality to consider, doesn't it? If you ever find yourself hiking through a completely silent forest, and you hear someone, maybe even your own voice, calling your name through the trees, will you answer? Because if you do, it may already know exactly who you are. Thank you for joining me, and as always, keep questioning what you see.